This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, action, we're live.
And we're live. Okay, great. So thank you everyone so much for coming. This is the first event in Reverie, which is a poetry event series, poetry defined very broadly, that is organized by students in the Comparative Literature department at the Graduate Center at CUNY. So me and a couple other students have sort of conceived of this event series as a space for students to propose events also. Oh, sorry, before we continue, if anyone is not okay with being recorded, either just let me know in the chat or again, have your camera off. But if I have everyone's permission, this event will, be recorded and posted somewhere at some point. So if anyone can't make it, we can send it to them. Okay, now that we've got all of the particularities of Zoom covered. Yeah, so this is the first event, so it's really special and a bit disorganized, but thank you for bearing with us. And yeah, I'm extremely grateful to the Comparative Literature department, specifically Giancarlo and Bettina and Carol, for helping us, advertise this event, get it going, and also sponsoring and funding it. So I'll kind of say at the end what we have in store, but we have some really amazing events coming up, and this is just the first of many. So I'll also say that if you would like to, if you're a student or even not a student, just a normal person, and you would like to collaborate with us and propose an event, we're super happy to, work with you. And yeah, maybe Jared will drop our email in the chat. Otherwise, I'll read our mission statement and be official about it. So Reverie is a monthly event series coordinated by students in the Department of Comparative Literature at the Graduate Center CUNY, inviting affiliated faculty and guest speakers from broad areas of interdisciplinary practices. Reverie provides a platform for reflection and public discourse on poetry, innovative fiction, critical theory and philosophy, independent publishing, and translation. So our first event is with the incredible Mitch Anzuoni of Inpatient Press, and we're extremely lucky to have him speaking with us today, this evening, whenever you're watching this. And I'm really grateful. Mitch is a really good friend and collaborator, and I have my personal sort of debt to Inpatient Press, and I'm just gonna read his bio. Mitch Anzuoni is an author, editor, and designer based in NYC. He is the founder and self-named executive janitor of Inpatient Press, as well as the director of research for the Bard Meme Lab. His writing has appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, Logic Magazine, Rhizome, and Harper's. So Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. We're very happy to have you.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you everyone at CUNY. I'm usually only able to kind of like talk about this stuff on like a street corner outside Port Authority. So I'm very excited to, have a little bit of institutional backing here. So.
Yes, it's just the perfect fit, in my opinion, to have Inpatient Press be kind of the introduction to the series, to sort of, showcase like the possibilities of what we want to do. Anyway, so as I said, like I personally love Inpatient Press. Mitch published my chapbook in 2017, 2018, 2017. Yeah. And we've collaborated on a couple of other projects, but I kind of think it would be interesting for our talk to start at the very beginning. So Mitch, if you want to sort of talk about the beginnings of Inpatient, how it got started, how and when you decided to start a small press, just how did that get going?
Absolutely. So I moved to New York City after graduating from Bard College. I moved in 2013, and I embarrassingly really wanted to be a poet. Like I really wanted to, I was originally wanted to be a writer. I wanted to hold readings and have all the sort of community aspects everyone, imagines that they receive when they move to New York. And, that didn't really pan out. I remember going to like readings and there'd be like 5 people, all of whom were my friends and were clearly there to humor me and whatnot. But you know, through that, I started realizing that there was this entire ecosystem of small presses, and that there was like a lot of cool publishing projects and people making books. And I've always been obsessed and fascinated by books, like the book object. I was a voracious reader as a kid. Like books were like my only friends growing up, really. No, I mean, like I had friends, but like they were like the people I felt like I could deeply confide in. You know, I kind of felt like Petrarch a little bit, where like I felt like a deep communication with the authors, and I would carry them around and they were like my little pals. But honestly, the idea for Inpatient Press wasn't my idea. I had a friend, Rory, who I went to school with, who was like, he's extremely, he always has amazing ideas. He's always kind of bubbly, always wants to do stuff. And he was like, hey, we should start a press. And I was like, that sounds great. I've never done that. And I love doing things I have no idea about. Like, I love just kind of getting in and like doing something, and just making it happen. And it kind of started off as just, we were like, oh, it'll be like an epistolary thing. We're going to like make like mail art and like chapbooks. And we've got all these stamps. And I remember we were sitting around thinking of what to name the press. And I think I said impatient, like with an M. And then he was like, inpatient? And I was like, impatient. He was like, inpatient. And I was like, I guess that's the name of the press. And we kind of like liked that stupid little correspondence, which has plagued us since then. Like if you Google Inpatient Press with an M, there's like an entire alternate universe of people who think that that's what the name is. And it's kind of amazing. Like there's all these libraries that have it like officially collected like that. And then I actually bought the URL for Impatient with an M. Anyway, and so, you know, from that extremely drunken conversation began the origins of Inpatient Press. And really it started off as a way, so we were originally like, we wanted to do mail art and like do kind of printmaking and make little zines. But then the first thing we actually did was, I was living with an artist whose name is August Cross. And he was a very good friend of mine from Bard. And we had this like room in our house. We had this room in our house where he was just filling it with these paintings that he was doing on vellum. He was doing these beautiful India ink paintings on vellum, and then like giving them very poetic titles, like essentially kind of you know, writing little poems to title his paintings. And I was like, these are amazing, these are so cool. And he was like, yeah, but no gallery wants to show them, you know, I can't get, no one really cares. Like, you know, he's trying to be an artist in New York. It's a, you know, absolute meat grinder. It's brutal. And I was like, well, I think we can help you out. Like, let's just, like, it kind of started off as a way to be like, let's just legitimize our friends' art. Like, let's just, like, the thing that's so interesting about running a press is that it really is like a serious like veneer, right? Where it's like, oh, you think there's all this kind of like legitimacy and it's a publishing house and that you are somehow like esteemed from on high to be able to anoint these works and bring them into the world, when in fact you're just a couple of, you know, scrappy little stoners in this old schoolhouse in Queens, and you're just, you know, paid someone in California to make a book, right? Like it was very much like a very learning process as we kind of like gathered it all together. And we really were just kind of like, I really believed in my friend's art and I really wanted to make it happen. And that was the first book that we did. And we were like online too, you know, we were publishing people's writings online. We were one of those like online magazines that, you know, were kind of in vogue for a minute with like, you know, online writing and poetry and all that. But that really kind of like wasn't really my main bag, really. You know, I was more interested in like the books and creating these books and really supporting my friends, right? Because I was kind of like down and out on myself a little bit. I was like, I'm not going to be like a writer. There's this I forget, I think it was maybe Maurice Girondia, who did Olympia Press in Paris. And he said that a great publisher is a failed writer because they know the real thing when they see it. And that really like deeply like resonated with me. And I was kind of like, that is like, and so, you know, it felt like I was seeing the real thing, you know, and I was like, someone needs to support this. Like, you know, like I need to be the person who takes that step and you know, immanentizes this work, who brings it into life. And so that's kind of what was like our modus operandi that we started out with, where it was, if I saw, you know, some artist or writer or someone who I felt like wasn't getting the recognition or needed, you know, they needed to start off, right? They needed like just that little extra push to become, you know, an entity, an artistic entity, or to exist in this space. I was willing to be the one to take that jump, I guess. And so that's what it kind of started off as. And so with, we did August's book first, which was a lot of fun. And, we did a bunch of readings. We got into fights because, he's a very temperamental artist. And also he was mad because like his mom, who runs a gallery, wanted to buy like hundreds of copies. And I was like, I don't want to just sell books to your mom. Like, like I had like this whole like vision and everything. He's a really great guy though. And so, that's like kind of how it slowly started off. And for about like 2 years, from about 2013 to 2015, that's what it was. It was like people I knew in my circle, or people who I like got introduced to at galleries or at readings. And I was like, I like their work. Why don't you have a book out? Like, why don't you have a collection? Like, why aren't you like, published essentially? Like that, if I ever found myself asking that question about someone I had met or knew, I took it upon myself to do that. Right. And Rory, was extremely supportive too. And he was helping with the design. And we did like this amazing, collection together that was like a newsprint collection. And I will be honest, it was kind of like an insane, it was the first time we were really publishing. This is around 2014. And it was the first time we did like an anthology together. And, it was like the third book I think we'd done, like the third like publishing thing that we had done. And it was this real mess and trying to gather together who's who, a collection of whatever. But I recall the craziest part was that I was in charge of getting it printed. And I had to find like an offset newsprint printer. And I had been in New York for about a year. So I was like a complete idiot about that kind of stuff. And I remember I found a place on Yelp. I literally just went on Yelp and did offset printer. And I found a place on like Avenue X in Flatbush, like basically in Brighton Beach, like way, 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 way down. And they were really cheap. And I was like, this is amazing. And they had like, they had a very nice website. And I was like looking at all the stuff on their website. I was like, this is great. We had finally done the design. We had argued over who should be in it, who should not. We did all the typical editorial sparring that is so romanticized, but is actually just like angry, passive aggressive emails. And we ended up, finally, we were having this big release party at my apartment in McKibben Street at the time. And we were having this big party and there had been no word from the printer at all. And I was like, I took the day off work. I was so stressed. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this is insane. They weren't answering any phone calls. They like no emails. And I was like, oh my God, like I have literally like already destroyed my press. Like I've completely ruined everything. So I got in a taxi, like one of those green cabs, all the way down to Avenue X. And I got out at the address that was at Yelp. And it was this like really shabby, like boarded up storefront. And my stomach just dropped. And I was like, I have been taken for a ride. Like, this is insane. Like, it was like a boarded up, like crappy print shop. Like completely, it was a print shop, but it was like the windows were all papered over. There was like, bars on them and everything. And it was like next to like a GNC or something, like on that row on Avenue X where the little strip malls are. And I was like, what am I doing? And I was like, I'm here. So I like banged on the door and I just like kept banging for like 5 minutes. And then finally this like, for lack of a better word, like kind of grody dude opened the door. He was like, what do you want? And I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I've been calling and like emailing you. I put in this like print project. It's called Incident Codex. Like, do you like what's going on? Like, the party's today. Like, I need the books. It's supposed to be released.
Great
And he was like, oh, what? Thank you, thank you. And he was like, oh yeah. Come in. And I go inside, and it's like covered in just like papers, like those yellowed kind of like carbon copy forms everywhere, just like covered in crap. And I was like, what? I was like gonna cry. I was like, this is this is a disaster. Like, what the hell is going on? And he goes behind the desk and he's like, oh yeah, I got your order. Can you sign this? And I was like, yeah. And I signed it. And he was like, we'll get them to you. And I was like, today? And it was like, oh yeah, no worries about it. Wait, where are we sending them to again? And I was like, 248 McKibben Street. And he was like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm gonna go. Is this real? And he was like, yeah, don't worry, dude. He was actually pretty nice. He was like, don't worry, we got this. And I was like, okay. And this is at like around noon. So I take a cab back, and I'm like sitting in my apartment again on the verge of tears, just being like, I have ruined everything. I am gonna like have to live in like a shack in upstate. Like I'm gonna be laughed at in New York. And at around like the party was supposed to be at like 6 or 7ish, like general like reading times. And at about 5, I get a call, and this guy is like, hey, like I'm outside, and I look outside my window, and there's just like a white, like nondescript van, and I'm like, okay, and I go down, and he's like, you with Inpatient Press? I'm like, that's me. And he was like, okay, here you go. And he like opened the back of this van, and it was empty except for these pallets where all the codexes had been printed. And he was like, these are yours, right? And I was like, yeah. And I was like I was again gonna like cry. I was like, oh my God. And he just like totally unloaded them. And he was like, there you go. And he got in the van and drove off. And I was like, wow, that was insane. And it was like, and it was a really beautiful reading, and it was super fun. But like I was like completely high on like adrenochrome or adrenaline or whatever. And I was just like so like blown away. And I think that kind of sums up what the first couple of years of Inpatient were kind of like.
Oh,
They were just like a complete barely contained mess. And I'm almost positive I drive by that place pretty often, like when I go to the beach or like when I have to go to Brighton Beach for unspecified reasons. And it's always, I always look at it and I was like, that's where I became a publisher. Like that's where it all began.
oh. You've
Yeah.
never told me that story. It's like such a beautiful birth story of Inpatient Press. And it's just sort of like these things work out. If you have a will, if there's a will, there's a way.
I honestly think it was like a mob front or something, because it was such a just totally like clearly the guy knew a guy who could get something printed like that. Because usually I get stuff offset printed at like Linko
Yeah.
now, which is a great place in Queens, and
Mhm.
it takes like weeks. You know what I mean? Like it's like a intensive process. But for whatever reason, that guy just like made it happen, and I feel like it was like either a front or something. I don't know, but I'm forever grateful to them.
That's crazy.
And
How did
and
the
what-
I was just gonna ask, how did the books come out? Like, were they nice? Did he do a good
oh,
job?
they were beautiful. They were like, and it was like a huge, very thick, newspaper tabloid. It was like almost like 100 pages. It was kind of an insane thing to do this like big, thick tabloid thing. And I don't even have any copies left of it. I mean, I might somewhere like in the shelves here. I'm here, by the way, live from the Inpatient HQ in Midtown Brooklyn. But I think I have like, I might have like one copy somewhere stashed here, but it was just, it was just gone, and it came up very beautifully. Austin Slade Julian, who's an incredible musician, did the cover art. It was like a mixture of photography and writing and all that. But yeah, that was like kind of what the early the early years of Inpatient were like.
That's awesome. I feel like that just fits so well with Inpatient's philosophy, though you've come such a long way. I mean,
Yeah,
the Inpatient HQ where you are now, like you've got it all set up. Like it's still incredibly DIY energy, but you have, like you have your system. So, and
yeah, I was gonna say I can talk about that a little bit, because
yeah.
even from the beginning, um, I had like some friends who I knew from Bard, like Andrew Durbin, who was running a press called Wonder, and like he was like the only kind of contact I knew, and Kit, my dear friend Kit Schluter, and they actually ran a press together too called O'Clock, which was amazing, and I really wanted to be published by them, and but basically, I had no contacts, and I just remember being like, these are the only people like I know, and I would talk to them, and they were all like, you got to be on SPD, small press distribution, and I remember I sent my stuff to SPD and I got rejected. Like they didn't want anything that we had, and I was like, well, I guess like the world isn't ready. Slash, I don't care. And since then, I've kind of just been like, I'm just going to distribute them myself,
Mhm.
And starting out, in like 2013, 2014, 2015, it was all just me being at book fairs, doing readings at like this place Mellow Pages that doesn't exist anymore, doing all sorts of these kind of like very ad hoc, just seat of your pants kind of things. It was very much like I would just like kind of just show up and make it happen. And things really kind of started to change. I think they didn't change. They haven't changed that much. But in 2016, I published a chapbook by the artist Ryndon Johnson called "Nobody Sleeps Better Than White People," which is one of my favorite things that we've ever done. And the title comes from the name. It's like a facetious title that comes from the name of this insane study that was conducted that we were both obsessed with. And he was like, it has to be called this. But it really just came together so organically. Like I was at this place called BHQFU. I was really involved in like this like weird art school brouhaha. that was kind of like, a bit insane, to be completely honest. But, the way that I work is very much just kind of like, I was like, Rin, you're like a genius. Like, why don't you have a book like this? And then they were like, I don't know. And so we kind of were like, all right, let's make this happen. And we threw it all together. We made this chapbook. I did, I printed it on vellum pages, kind of like as a callback to the first book that I had done. And it's like kind of a signature that I've done since then.
Mhm.
And I just remember, before then, I was happy if like a book of ours sold like 50 copies. I would do very small print runs, and I was like, oh my God, like we did it. I'd be so happy if like someone I didn't know about the book, right? And I
Yeah.
remember we did this chapbook, and it just like exploded. Like it was amazing. It has sold like I'm not, it's sold like thousands of copies, and it's like a zine. It's like a tiny, not tiny, it's like something like 20 pages long, but it's like your typical, like I literally like made them all in my studio, like folding them and with a bone folder, like, creasing and doing all that. I made them all by hand. I made thousands of these things by hand. And it was just crazy to see that like suddenly, all the, it was everywhere, and people were super into it, and the response was crazy in a way that I honestly had never anticipated. And I don't think Rin did either. He was just like, oh my God. And we later did a reading in Berlin, like years later. And Rin was like, I don't have anything. I don't know what I'm going to read. And I was like, you just read this chapbook we did from like 3 years ago. And he did.
Yeah.
And people like, I mean, you hosted this reading,
I
Coco.
remember
Uh,
that. Yeah. At
People were like,
Misread.
people loved it. And he was like, still holds up, and it really does. And that was just kind of the turning point when I realized it was like, not only was I trying to help, my friends and people who I thought deserved to be like published, right? Because the thing about publishing is that it's so gatekeepy. Obviously, when you have like an editorial concern, it's necessarily so. But like I said earlier, there's like this weird mythos where it's like publishing is some like you get like into a state of grace or something, or you like have to enter into like the ascended circle to be known as like a published author, or have like, the title of author or whatever. And I was kind of like, I really think my main, motive for that is breaking that down. And so with Rin, it was kind of like, not only is it where I'm supporting my friends, but it was also the kind of thing where it's like, I just want to put books out into the world that I want to read that don't exist. Like that soon became my main driving force, really, was it. Like, and in the beginning, I was like, oh, I want to make a literary community. I want to, have a circle, blah, 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 blah. But then I was kind of like, I really just I want to read a lot of books. There's books that I want to read that don't exist, and I want to make them exist. I want to like summon them into this world. And that's kind of brought us to, that's kind of the origin story in a way of Almost Zero,
Yeah.
which is,
Well, yeah, I
you want
definitely want you to talk about Almost Zero. But first, I think, yeah, I mean, that story about Rin's book is, I think, really exemplary of kind of how Inpatient functions. And maybe just for people in the audience who are like not so familiar with small press talk, because most of Inpatient's early books were chapbooks, right?
Yeah, they almost all were. We had a few,
Yeah.
published books. Like we published like Pierre Jory, his like writings, who was again someone who was like amazing, but he was mostly a translator, and he had such incredible original writings that had never been published. And he's like a very famous translator, yet no one seemed to care about his own original writings. So then we were like, why don't we just put this out there, right? Like, why
Yeah.
don't we just make this a book? But aside from that and the first book we did, everything was like chapbooks or zines that I would hand make myself
Mhm.
in my apartment, and then later here at the Dean Street headquarters.
Yeah.
But so a chapbook is basically, it's a fancy word
Mhm.
for like kind of like a small little poetry book that's usually printed on, commodity commercial printers. Like I have like just a simple laser jet that I use, and I printed them on like, I basically, my hookup for a while was I would go to Central Artist Supply, RIP, which doesn't exist anymore, on Third Avenue. And, I would just buy nice paper and print them on like a laser jet and just fold staple for hours while like blasting music and blasting spliffs and just kind of like, creasing. So it's very much like a zine in that sense. And that's what we did for a long time. Really, almost until Almost Zero, that was like most of what we did was just like handmade little books that we would sell. I used to go to the Brooklyn Book Festival, if you know where that is. Like, it's like this big book fair happens in Brooklyn, but tables at that time were still really expensive. So I would sell them out of a suitcase there. I had this like old, and I'll talk more about my fair tactics because I have a lot of good ones. But I used to just show up with like a suitcase and be like sitting by the fountain and just like selling them that way. And then we eventually got a table and they put us in a really bad location because they like looked at our stuff and they were like, you're just making these dinky little, like, you're not a real publisher. Your books aren't even perfect bound. They're stapled. Like, who gives a shit? Like, and then I ended up just, they put us on a table and way out in the boondocks of the fair. And I remember we just like sold out, but we were still just kind of like, this sucks. Like, why are we like relegated to like literally like, the nowhere zone? But yeah, so for a while, I mean, I still make tons of handmade books and I'll talk about that more too. But for a while, that was mostly what we're doing because small press tip, printing's really expensive.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
actually annoyingly expensive, especially in America. And that's because a lot of publishers a lot of printing presses and stuff are like closing down. There used to be a lot more, like even in 2015, there used to be like 5 huge like commercial presses you could go to get stuff relatively cheap. Like even then, and for me, it was still kind of expensive, but all but 2 of them are now closed, So it's like actually like a tragedy, a deindustrialization of like this printing supply chain. But at the time, it was just kind of like, I wanted to do something. I'm pretty good with my hands. I think I have a good design acumen. And I was just like, I just want to hand make these. So for a long time, for like the first 3 years, everything was basically handmade by me, stapled, mailed out, all that, which is I guess kind of in keeping with like the origin story of it, where we wanted to be like this epistolary kind of like press.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're not quite giving yourself enough credit here. Mitch single-handedly designs everything, from
Rory, in the beginning, Rory did the design, but then at about 2017, he kind of bowed out, pursued his own photographic projects. He's a genius photographer. He's amazing. And then since then, it's been solely the province of me being the designer, editor, executive janitor.
yeah, exactly, executive janitor. But yeah, I mean, it's a passion project, it's like so much work goes into this. And I think perhaps, especially for people who maybe aren't familiar with Inpatient, can we maybe talk about your philosophy of publishing? Like, I know your tagline is "We publish what others don't," right? And I think that this is so integral to the press in the ways that you were just speaking about, in terms of issues of access. Like, it's even just something like, buying a booth at a book fair, renting a booth at a book fair is extremely expensive.
It is.
You know, yeah, getting like mainstream kind of distributors to distribute your book is really, it's quite gate kept.
Extremely gatekept, but it's also honestly annoying because they choose, like, if you want to get published with somewhere like small press distribution, they only really take titles that are like perfect bound, can fit like on a shelf, are like nice, so you can't really do anything interesting or like fun or offbeat because they don't care and they won't carry it. Plus, they take a ton of money. It's you make way more money, and I'm sorry to be like homo economicus about this, but like you make way if you want to have a sustainable publishing practice, or at least not have a little bit of money to publish new stuff and not like continually, basically I subsidize the entire press myself with my real job. I could talk more about that later, but these places take like a 30 to they take a big cut, right? And that's like money that's also coming out of what you pay for artists too. That means less that you have to have smaller royalties to give to artists. You have less money left to pay not advance fees, but like we don't do advances. And advances when you give an author money and then they have to earn it back before they can start getting royalties. We just give honorariums and then you get royalties on top of that. So you get money and then you get royalties from the first book, like from day one. And but I was just kind of like so put off by all of that because it you lose money. And then it was also just kind of like they always would choose books that, like, I like all the books we make obviously, but they would always choose ones that were kind of like weren't my favorite, and I was like, this one needs more love, and I was like, I'm just going to do it myself. And bookstores like come to me, and I have very good relations with bookstores, and I love all the people that I work with, like at various places, like Skylight Books in Los Angeles, Topos here in New York, like, you know, Printed Matter. The people at Printed Matter are amazing. Like, they're so supportive. And I would say the best part about Printed Matter is that they'll take anything. Like, you can be day one, just do your own thing, and then you can consign it to them. And if it does well, they'll be like, hey, we want to like get more. Like, it's very, they're one of the big resources that that I think is like keeping this vibe alive
Yeah.
in New York.
Yeah, they're
Because so
awesome.
much,
You can
uh,
propose like a book to Printed Matter, and if they like it, they'll sell it. Like,
yeah, no, but like, but it's just amazing, and I love, I just love like having that relationship because it feels so much better than like going through like this third party. And there's like bookstores like Center for Fiction, where they, you know, I went in and I was like, what's your small press, you know, like purchasing policy? Like, can I consign books to you? They're like, we only buy from distributors, as if that's something to be proud of. And so what I do is I sneak books into there. I just like will drop it, and I like we did it with Whole Foods. I put it in like one of the window displays, and I'm pretty sure I got an email later that day that was like, hi, I don't know who like runs this press, but this book, like I read it on my break in Fort Greene Park and it like changed my life. And then we sold a bunch of copies. Can we buy some from you? And I was
that's
like, why did you just do that
amazing.
first? Why did you just do that in the first place?
Yeah. Wait,
like, you know what I mean?
can you talk about Whore Foods by Laura Warman and
Well, that's getting a little ahead of it. Is, I mean, we can talk about
okay,
it,
yeah.
sure. But anyway, we can get to that because there's a lot of funny stories about that that's related to like small press publishing.
Yes.
Um, but basically, you know, like I'm saying, is like with the whole idea of there being all this gatekeeping, it's all artificial. It's all smoke and mirrors, man. Like, it's completely like stood up to be like it's this impressive facade. It's a publishing house. Oh my God, FSG. These are esteemed, you know, gentlemen and gentlewomen and gentle folks of publishing. But it's really all complete like smoke and mirrors. And it's like I have friends at FSG who like celebrate when like one of their like, you know, literary rarefied titles sells like, you know, 500 copies, right? It's all very much like a big front to keep up appearances. And if you want to run a press, it takes a lot of effort, you know, it takes a lot of your time, takes a lot of creasing paper, if you like that, in like paper cuts and stuff. But you know, it's actually extremely rewarding. And I think you'll see that, you know, people pick up on it and people want that. People don't want the, you know, the thing in the can, you know, they want like something that's real and something that's like being made by somebody. And that's why, like I said, I love all the bookstores who I have a very close relationship, like Fungus Books, Skylight. Again, Skylight honestly has been like the best. They love a lot of our stuff. I just sent a bunch of great work out to them. Very some of our latest stuff. But like, you know, just I love having that relationship with bookstores, and I love going around and just dropping stuff off at a bookstore. It's so fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can just walk around. And when I first started doing it, I'll be honest, I felt like kind of a loser. I was like, I'm just schlepping these books around. I'm like, you know, used car salesman or whatever, like showing up, being like, you want to buy a book? Like, you know, like knocking on doors. But now I love it because, you know, I drop in, I browse the books, I talk to people, I drop them off. They love the books. Just the other day, I went to Spoonbill and Sugartown Books in Guillaume'sburg, Brooklyn, and I dropped off a copy of Almost Zero. And the guy was like, "Oh man, like I know this." And then we like talked about for like 10 minutes, and I like, you know, gave him a copy and stuff like that. And when you're talking about accessibility too, I think one thing that is important is pricing.
Yeah.
I try to like price my books pretty cheaply. Some books are more expensive than others just because you know, well, we can talk about it a little bit later, but basically, you know, I try to keep my books as cheap as possible. And then if sometimes people email me and they're like, hey, do you ship to here? And I'll add the shipping and I'll cover it. Or sometimes people have emailed me and they're like, I can't afford, like, you know, like, is there any discount, da da da. And I'll just email them the PDF. Or sometimes I just email them, I just mail them the book, right? Like, I want people to read my book, like my books. Like, I'm not a business. I
Yeah,
think the
absolutely.
profit motive, like the idea of like making a profit or the profit motive, has to be sublimated to this idea of like an artistic surplus, right? Like what people in like the degrowth movement might call like a dépense, right? Like kind of this extra like surplus. Like that's what the profit motive needs to be, you know, kind of turned into. It's not like, you know, obviously it's important to like be able to have money to like produce the books, but I have a saying, and it's there's always more money, and there is, and it's whether you're like, you know, scrounging or, you know, working. What I work a full-time job. I work as like a freelance computer programmer right now. And that's how I subsidize a lot of the books and how I get money out to authors and how I make sure that they're paid and how I do all the shipping and all that. And I remember when I said that at our reading we did at Miss Read in 2019, I was talking about how I subsidize it by being a computer programmer, and everyone laughed. And I thought that was kind of hilarious. Like all the Germans in the audience like were like kind of chuckling at that, and I was like, it wasn't really a joke, but I guess it is kind of funny. Like
Well,
in
I
a
mean,
way.
in Germany, it's funny. In Germany,
Yeah,
that's, people, everything is cheap. You don't have to
that's
like
true.
work
It's
your
true.
butt off to make a living and run a press. But
No, but I also like doing because I feel like someone has to, honestly. It's like I just, I get that not, everyone can have disposable income. And obviously that's one thing too about publishing is that it does require a fair amount of upfront capital. But there's like, services like honestly, like Lulu, BookBaby, these so-called commodity services that are kind of looked down upon by like, like book people. They're amazing. They make really high quality, really good books for cheap. And like they let you actually create and make these books and make them available. And I feel like it's weird that people look down on them because it's like you didn't get it printed at whatever. But like if you're going to McNaught & Gunn, who's like one of the biggest printers, it's where like Ugly Duckling Press, it's where I get some of my books printed and all that, right? They're just using the same presses as Lulu. They're just more expensive. like there's this weird like elitism and gatekeeping that I feel like
yeah,
runs like rivulets through all of publishing. But anyway, yeah. But
yeah,
that's so
absolutely.
my philosophy is kind of just that. It's just kind of like, listen, you just make your own lane and do it. Like you just need to have the grind set, and
Yeah.
then you can do what you need to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think also the way that you started out with the chapbooks and using kind of affordable materials, like I know you just get your papers from what's it called? Paper Source.
Well, well, I can talk about that because, all right, there used to be like 3 amazing paper stores in New York, and they're all gone. And so I just go to paper stores and I get them there, and it's relatively affordable, and it's not like a magical cool experience, but the paper's really nice and it does what it has to do, right? There is a romance to running a small press for sure, and it's really fun, but also a lot of it is like standing in line at the post office, standing in line at Paper Source while they're trying to upsell you on like a sticker that says like dump Trump or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of like mundanity to produce these books that I hope induce transcendental next level experiences in people's minds. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, if you want to, I have 2 things that I think we could talk about. One, in terms of accessibility, and making your books, available in kind of non-conventional formats, either by like just guerrilla distributing them in bookstores or showing up at book fairs with a trench coat with pockets with a ton of inpatient books in that.
you gave it away.
Yeah, sorry.
No, well, because that's the thing. It's like at Printed Matter, like to get a table at the Printed Matter book fair, it's like several $1,000s, and you have to make the list, right? And it's really funny because I love Printed Matter. If you work for Printed Matter and you're listening to this, I love you. But like, whenever I've applied to the book fair, I've been rejected every time, and I was kind of sick of it. So one year I got a trench coat. I went shopping and got this Burberry trench coat, from like Goodwill by the Hoyt Schimmerhorn stop. And then I went to this tailor on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, and they put pockets in it. And I just showed up to the fair with this trench coat, and I just stuffed a bunch of books in the pockets. And I would go up to people and be like, "Want to buy a book?" And you know what?
And it worked.
At first I was like, I'm gonna get either arrested or like thrown out or whatever, but it didn't happen. And I do remember this amazing moment where I went to LA for it, and I like locked eyes with this guy Keith, who I know from Printed Matter, and it was like kind of like a hot day. It was like he gave me a look like you're wearing a pretty big trench coat, and it's like 85 degrees, and I kind of just like gave him the nod, the knowing nod. But I ended up selling a copy of Almost Zero to this guy, and then like months later I got an email, and he was like, I just want to let you know that like this is like the best book that I've read in like years, and that I cannot tell you how happy it made me that I bought it out of a trench coat. And I did the same thing recently at the Brooklyn Art Book Fair. I mean, the Brooklyn Book Festival. I get them confused. The Brooklyn Book Festival, where I published this book by Samuel Delaney, which is like an erotic. It's porn. I call it erotica, but it's like porn. And so I was like, you got to sell it out of a trench coat. Like, there's no other way to buy it. Like, it's buying it at a bookstore is fine, but like, you got to get the full like trench old New York experience. You know what
Oh
I mean? And
yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. customers were very satisfied, and I got a lot of compliments. But that's what I mean. It's like we need like these alternate modes of distribution, whether it's you're just mailing it out yourself or you're selling it from a trench coat. Like I really just think that that's kind of like what it's all about. And that also brings me to the news boxes.
Yeah, I
So,
was
which
just
is
gonna say, the news boxes are an incredible mode of distribution.
so for those who don't know, New York City used to be filled with like, you probably see them because like the China Star and like South Morning Post, like all these newspapers are sold out of these news boxes, right? They're kind of like on the corners everywhere. And in 2019, I was like, I want one. I was like, I really want to sell like stuff out of it. Like, I think it's such a good idea. And so I ended up buying one from, I went to Hohokus, New Jersey, which is a very sacred, amazing place. And I went to this place called Granny's Attic, where I found one on Craigslist, and I went and picked it up with my friend Ed Halter. And I just remember it's like this beautiful yellow, gorgeous box. And I bought it, and the guy was so excited. He's like, this thing's been in the store for years. It was kind of our mascot, but like, I'm so happy that it's like going to somebody. And then the dude upsold me. This is one of my favorite things is like at the checkout line, we like bring down the thing on a dolly and all that. And when we were checking out, he had a katana in like a case, like this really like amazing case. And I was like, is that a katana? And he was like, oh yeah. This guy's like this amazing like old Jewish guy. And he was like, oh yeah, it's from my friend on Long Island. He's the world's only samurai moil. I was like, oh my God, you have completely, for those who don't know, the moil is the rabbi or the guy who circumcises a child. And so the idea of circumcising a child with a samurai sword immediately sold me. And I was like, okay. So I like put the news box in back of Ed's VW Jetta along with the katana. And then we celebrated by going to Olive Garden. And then we went back to New York. And my plan was I was going to put the news box in front of the Whitney, because there's this huge space in front of the Whitney Museum. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's okay. But like there's this huge space in front of the Whitney. And I was like, it's just calling out for a news box. Like I remember going to New York when I was a kid. I was born in Massachusetts. I went to New York once when I was a kid, and it like blew my mind. And there used to be newsstands everywhere, news boxes everywhere that was selling everything. The New York Times, art magazines, periodicals, whatever. It used to be everywhere. But in 2016, a bunch of basically like Upper East Side like rich ladies were complaining that these news boxes were a blight, that were taking down property values, and that they were a nuisance and blah blah blah. Typical like Upper East Side NIMBY, boring old lady stuff. And so since then, you have to register your news box with the Department of Transportation and like get like, insured and all this stuff. And so I did. Like I got a notarized form being like, this news box is located at 98 Gansevoort Street and da 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 da. And I was like ready to go. So I got my news box. I put all these like materials in it. I made these like small chapbook forms of Whore Foods, which is an amazing erotica book that I published by the inimitable L.A. Warman. And so I was like, I'm so happy. I made custom decals for this box. I had decorated, I cleaned it up. I set it to be a quarter, just one quarter, and you get like a real thrill. They'd say you can't buy a thrill, but you can, only 25 cents. And so I put it right there, right in front of the Whitney, like literally like directly in front of the main steps of the Whitney at the door. And I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I walked away. I was like, I did it. I did it. And so a week later, I was like, I should go check on how it's doing. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like you can just log on and see how the news box is doing. So I was like, I have to go to the West Side and like check out how it's doing. And I get out the subway. I'm like, got butterflies in my stomach. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see, like, I'm very excited. It's going to be empty. And it just wasn't there. I was literally just like looking around being like, oh no. I was like, oh no. Oh fuck. Are you serious?
They
Like
took it.
I literally stood at that sidewalk just like looking around being like, did they move it? Da 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 da. And so I called the Department of Transportation, and I was like, did you take my news box basically? And the lady was like, no, like it's this one woman who runs the entire thing too. She's like, she has the title of like head of news boxes and like sidewalk enforcement or something. She's a legend. And she was like, oh no, we would send you, you'd get a notice and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, oh man, I wonder what the hell happened. And I go to the guard, I go to like the security guard at the Whitney, and I was like, hey, I know this is weird, but like, you didn't happen to like get rid of a news box or like move a news box out there? And he's like, nope, no idea what you're talking about. I was like, okay, I know this is probably like outside your pay grade, and I've been like a security guard. I know how much it's boring and everything, but like, can you like look, like it's just gone, it's missing. Like, I know you have security cameras. Could you maybe like look at it, see what happened? And he was like, oh yeah, we could do that. No problem, no problem. And I was like, you sure it wasn't the way? Like, I'm not trying to, I'm not blaming you. Like, I get it, things happen. Like, did you move it or anything? And they're like, no way, we don't touch that stuff. The sidewalk's public property. And I was like, great. And so the next day, I'm driving to Long Island to this like sports memorabilia store to pick up another news box to replace the one that was gone. And I get a call, and it's the head of security from the Whitney. And he was like, is this Mitch Anzuoni? And I was like, yeah. He was like, listen, we reviewed the security tapes and we found out what happened to your news box. And I was like, okay. And he's like, well, we accidentally moved it. We moved it. It was in the way, and we moved it, and we put it on this loading dock, and it was accidentally picked up by a truck and just taken to a scrapyard in Red Hook and destroyed. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I was like screaming at this guy on the phone, be like, what? You accidentally got it destroyed? Like, how does that even happen? And he was like, oh, I'm really sorry. There was the Andy Warhol opening at the Whitney. And I was like, Andy Warhol? Andy Warhol? I'm about to go Valerie Solanas on this guy. Like, are you fucking serious? Like, Andy Warhol? Like what? And he was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, listen, I don't know who is like in charge of that, whatever happened, but like, I need to speak with him. And so he put me in touch with Adrian. I think his name was Adrian Hardwick, who is the director of customer experience at the Whitney. And he reached out, and I basically got my friend. So the person who helped me move the news box the first time was a law student at NYU, and I got him to write an extremely threatening, like legalese, like threatening letter, being like, I have all the requisite paperwork, you have damaged all my property that's worth like X amount, da 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 da. It's pursuant to like, New York legal code, blah blah blah. Like, it was amazing. It's one of the finest pieces of legal writing I've ever seen in my life. And I fired it off to Adrian, the head of customer experience, whatever the hell that means. And they responded very promptly, being like, oh my God, like, of course, we would love to make everything like right. Like, what do you want from us? And so I wrote and I said, I want the cost of the news box and the materials inside reimbursed. It was like $600. And I want a personal letter of apology from the Whitney on Whitney letterhead signed by you. And so they did. And I'm pretty sure to this day, I'm the only person who has gotten a like direct letter, like to specifically me, letter of apology from the Whitney. And then I took that letter that the Whitney sent me, and I turned it into a poster, and I put that poster in the new news box that I set up outside the Whitney. So yeah, and if you'll allow me, the news boxes are still there, and you can actually see them in this the New York Times stock photo.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. There it is. Wait, Mitch, you're muted for some reason.
Sharing my screen. But anyway, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Basically, whenever the New York Times runs a story about the Whitney, my news boxes are in it, which I think is kind of hilarious. But yeah, but now I have a news box on Classen and Green outside of Clementine Bakery. I have like I have two news boxes outside the Whitney now. And then last time I went, somebody who's completely unrelated to me had put their own news box there as well.
Like distributing literature?
Yeah, they're running like a news, they ran like their own zine. So there's just another news box next to mine, which I love. I want there to be a fucking wall of news boxes in front of the Whitney. I want there to be like 20 news boxes, like castellating the entire street corner so that no one may dare enter the Whitney without at least perusing one of our fine wares at the select select retail experience. But like, that's like a motive, like, I love that.
Yeah.
Like, it's
I
very
just
like, I
think
guess, like Thomas Pynchon, like, yeah.
it is. Yeah. I just think it's hilarious that Inpatient Press is like in this long-standing kind of feud with the Whitney, and you're
Well, it's still ongoing too, because you know
yeah.
what, Rin Johnson, he's a very famous artist now, as he should be. He's extremely talented and amazing, and we've done books with them, and I'm very excited to be working with him always. And his gallery representative reached out to me, and they're like, just so you know, we want the Whitney. The Whitney will reach out to you soon because they want to consign some copies to their store, and I'm eagerly awaiting the Whitney to reach out to me, because I'm gonna be like, listen, I'm not gonna sell copies in the store. You have to sell them through my news box and make it an extended site of the biennial. Like my news box must be included as part of the biennial.
I
If you
really
want
hope that works out.
books. But I mean, technically, the news boxes are in the Whitney, technically, because I had a friend, actually, this is through Rory, who, is obviously still a friend of the press and one of my dearest best friends and collaborator. But he sent me this. He went to Yale photo, whatever, so he knows like people who get like very fancy intern jobs at the Whitney or whatever. And he sent me a photo someone sent him where on the Whitney's new like employee training, there is now a dedicated slide to the news boxes saying, whatever you do not move or destroy property outside of the Whitney. Like, there's like a picture of the news boxes in this PowerPoint slide that's shown to all new Whitney employees, which I thought was perhaps the greatest artistic coup of all time. So
that's incredible. I'm shocked.
Yeah, no, it was so beautiful. And it's like, it's like the picture, I don't have the picture on me right now, but it's like it's like clearly like a cell phone picture of the news boxes with like them like very clearly highlighted, and there's like a big exclamation point and stuff. It's awesome.
It's just, yeah, it's so funny, the kind of divide between high and low artistic practices, and yeah, I love the newsbox story. I'm trying to be aware of the time though, so maybe we can talk. It's almost 7 already, so maybe we can talk about Almost Zero, since I feel like like to the comparative literature department, a lot of students are super interested in Russian or working with Russian. So, and I was telling some people in my class last night about Almost Zero, and there's a lot of interest. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator. And so basically, this was kind of a turning point in the press, because we had done stuff with people we had known and friends and people I had met and really wanted to do. And this is the first time where I was like, this was when I really wanted to make a book exist that, like I wanted to bring a book into English. It was the first translation that we had done. And basically I was watching the Adam Curtis documentary, Hypernormalization, and they mentioned this guy, Vladislav Surkov, in it as, the great cardinal of Russia, of being this like, mysterious entity that's behind Putin and blah, blah, blah. It was all very interesting. But what really got me was that he was a novelist. He was a playwright, novelist, artist, and he was obsessed with American culture. He has like a photo of like Barack Obama and like Tupac and someone else, I think maybe like Allen Ginsberg, on his desk or something like that, right? Like, extremely odd, weird guy who apparently wrote a novel under the pseudonym. And it was published in Russian, and I got a copy of it. I got a Russian copy of it. I don't speak Russian, but I have a friend from Bard, whose name is Nastia Valentine, who's an amazing performance artist, and who happens to also, she grew up with a Russian family, but she learned Russian. I think maybe even she might have taken a few classes, but it was pretty much like self-taught Russian. And she was like, I'll translate it. And at first I was like, I really just want to read it. Like, I was like, I'm willing to give you a translation commission. I just want to read it in English. And, for my own personal devious purposes. And her translation was so good. And I was like, this book is so, and I can talk a little bit about, what it means to translate, how like, the translator is always speaking. It's never truly the author, whatever. But the translation was so good, and the book was so good that I was like, we have to publish this, like, you know. And so we have another editor who is also kind of like an editor emeritus, whose name is Dan Schwartz. And I was like, Dan, we have to publish this. Like, this is insane. Like, this is next level. And the book is basically about the fall of the Soviet Union and all these, like, kind of how people deal with that psychologically and culturally in Russia, to see like the empire fall and have to live in this like new kind of like, capitalist paradigm, right? And so the book centers on for what's lack of a better word, like a forgery publishing house where they publish fake books. Like they publish like the Diary of William Shakespeare, or like Gravity's Rainbow 2, right? They publish all these like fake books that don't exist, and they just have all the previously employed people who were given like Soviet cultural grants. They employ all these people who are out of work, all the out of work artists, all the out of work writers, and they employ them in this publishing house to create these fake books and to publish these like like non-existent books, right? And I was like, this is genius. And I was like, we have to publish this book illegally. Like we can't, like, you know what I mean? Because like this guy's a total creep, a total cretin. Like he's like a rightoid creep. And I was like, we need to, like, as like an act, like, kind of in a way, like, instantiating what's in the book, like we should publish this book. Like we should publish it under his name and make a fake book that, like, book that technically doesn't exist, because it's published under a different name in Russian. It's published under Natan Dubovitsky, but it's very clearly written by this guy Vladislav Surkov. And we did we did vaguely reach out to the magazine that originally serialized it, but we obviously got no response. And with copyright, if you make a good faith attempt to reach out to the owners of the copyright and you try to work it out, it's basically a gray area. With copyright, I'll just do a little aside on copyright. The thing about copyright is that it's different for almost every single work. Because if you're a copyright holder, you can just be like, you can do whatever you want with it, right? It's almost always the case by case basis. And for this book, we were like, you know what? Fuck this guy. Like, this book is an important document of like the madness of Russia. And also we were kind of doing it to like kind of spoof like the kind of like Russiagate hysteria that was currently happening, because everyone was like, oh my God, there's like a piss tape, da 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 da, Trump is an agent of Putin. And we were really like, we need to like this book is so emblematic of all that insane lib hysteria that I was like, we need to put it out there. And so we basically, we got it translated. I went to this amazing printer in New Hampshire called Puritan Press, and we put it out. Like, we made the book happen. And it was the first time Inpatient had ever been written about in print. This guy from the New York Review of Books reached out to us. I think his name was Barry Ugrov or something like that. And he reached out and he was like, I've always wanted to read this book. Please, I want to write a piece for the New York Review of Books. And I was like, okay, but please don't use my name, because I was super paranoid I was going to get assassinated by like Russian agents. Like, I was like walking down Fifth Avenue and I would like look at like blacked out SUVs or whatever that were like rolling by, like thinking it would be like the day I get like hit with like an AK or whatever. But like because they whatever, like he's like clearly connected. But the book was like, it was like, for lack of a better word, it was like a smash. And like the review was amazing because like it was clearly very like, this book is fucked up and like this guy's a maniac. But we got so much coverage on it. People were so into it. I thought it was so hilarious because it was entirely published, quote unquote, like out of band. Like we just like made the book happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no rhyme or reason to making a book. If a book, my personal philosophy is like, if a book is written, certain books must exist. And I feel like this is one of those books that I was like, this has to exist. People in English have to read this book. I feel like it's so potent and so important. And then so we published this book. It was really fun. People are super into it. We did a reading with Matvey of UDP at KGB Bar. I read this amazing section where they described like the fake publishing operation, how they pump out these fake books. It was super fun. And then the crown jewel of it was Adam Curtis emailed me and he was like, I'd like to read a copy of this. I was like, of course.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he emailed me. And I was very happy to send him a PDF of the book. And then he responded back just being like, cheers. And I was like, well, there we go. I got to talk to Adam Curtis and he likes my book.
And he just said cheers. I love it.
Yeah, it was so awesome. But because like that's like, how I learned about the book. And I'm also a huge fan. But it really was like a new level for Inpatient because it wasn't so much, obviously the coverage is nice, but it was the kind of thing where I was like, I'm just going to like our motto, like I'm just going to publish what other people aren't. Like, I'm going to publish the books that I want to read. You know what I mean? Like or the books that I feel like need to exist that don't. And whether that means like finding an author or tracking down like an old manuscript or some like obscure text or whatever, that's, you know, that became my mission. Like after Almost Zero, I was like, this is like clearly what I was like, you know, made by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to do. Like I was like, this is something that clearly has to like happen, and I have to be the prime mover to do that, you know. And it was also like, you know, I really like doing translation. It's really fun to work with translators and see like, you know, the different renditions and all that. But that really was like kind of a turning point where it's like, all right, like let's kick it into high gear. And that's when I feel like the press really came into its own, you know. And I've had lots of fun copyright battles too. Like another example of that is I did this book called Averone, which my friend Kit Schluter wrote an amazing intro for. And he kind of turned me on to this writer called Clark Ashton Smith. And he's he's very dead. He died in like the 70s, but he's like an autodidact who lived in the middle of nowhere, like in Needles, California in the woods. And he taught himself Latin and French. And he wrote these really like almost Edgar Allan Poe-esque fantasy tales that are very ironic and purpled and dark. And he uses like ancient words very brilliantly. And he was published in a series in the 70s, but they never published the final book, which is called Averone. They published all the other, he's a fantasy author. He wrote like he made different worlds, you know, different like universes, whatever. But they never, and this series is like very famous. It's the Ballantine adult fantasy series. And, you know, it's never been published. And so I made an edition of the book that is in that style of the series, where it's like a pulp paperback with a beautiful painted cover by this artist, Clark Filio. And I designed it down to the spacing between paragraphs and like, you know, headings to be exactly like this book, right? Exactly like these old pulp fantasy novels. I made it $10. All his works are technically in the public domain. So people will like print very expensive editions of it. Like you could read some of these stories beforehand, but they'd be in a book that costs like $100 or online, right? And I honestly like, you know, whatever, make things accessible. I totally am down. But for me personally, I just love having a book. I just love reading the book. I love the book object. Anyway, I published this book and I get an email from this guy who is Clark Ashton Smith's basically like his wife's son. Like it wasn't his like biological child. It was his wife's son. And he was some professor at USC. He's some ancient dude. He's like 70 something years old. And he ran this company called Cassiana Literary Enterprises. And he sent me a very, very mean email where he was basically like, I want you to know that you are disrespecting Clark Ashton Smith's legacy by publishing this. You are in violation of copyright. I, if necessary, will resort to legal action. Like, please cease and desist publishing immediately. Like, this book is illegal. What, you know, blah, 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 blah. He sent me like everything. But the only thing was he just sent me an email. It wasn't like a statement from a lawyer. It wasn't anything like that. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, who the fuck are you? And I went and I looked up his company name and I searched it in the California business database. And I saw that his company had been in disarray. It hadn't paid its taxes in like 10 years. So it wasn't even a legal entity. He had no legal standing. And so then what I did was I went to this website called registeragent.com, which allows you to incorporate companies. And I incorporated a company called Cassiana Literary Enterprises, the name of his erstwhile company. And I replied back, I emailed him back being like, no, I am the president of Cassiana Literary Enterprises. And I sent him like all the official documentation and everything and being like, these books are completely in the public domain and you are a gatekeeping bully. I don't care if you're 70 years old. Like you can't just like threaten people and throw your weight around and like make it so this book is like 100 million, you know, like extremely expensive or whatever. And he never responded. So I'm now the president of that company, which I haven't honestly really done anything with, but he never bothered me again. And now there's a very long forum thread about it. There's like, you know, this forum dedicated to like this guy, Clark Ashton Smith, on this website called eldritchdark.net. And there's like this like 5-page long forum thread where people are like debating the book and how bad of a person I am because I published like a cheap edition of this book. It's pretty funny. There's a lot of like I said, there's a lot of crazy, weird gatekeeping around publishing and whatever. But I don't know. It feels good to be president of Cassiana Literary Prizes is all I can say. I'm a businessman.
It's crazy to me how, you know, upset different entities kind of get about things that are in the public domain. Like,
Mhm.
that's crazy.
I think it's just like, man, people get obsessed with like, he's my author, blah blah blah. Like people like get like this weird attachment, like how people do with like Marvel movies now or whatever, right? Like people like project themselves onto it. And I get it. I do that with books too, but like I want all books to be, the thing that's interesting is that like I was like, I should just make all my books free. Like I'll just make them free. But people, I feel like people do want to pay like a token amount, and they want to feel like they're helping contribute and do something like that. So that's why I try to price them as cheaply as possible. Like I would give them away, but like if you've ever walked by somebody who's like giving away a novel, it's like kind of like a weird feeling, and you're like, why is this guy just like shoveling them off, right? But if necessary, if you email me, I'll give you everything for free. I don't care.
Yeah, good to know. And also, like, you make beautiful books, like this one, the most recent one, second most recent one, actually.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
so
that's our most recent, like book.
Yeah, it's a book.
Yeah. It's bound. Yeah. I can talk a little bit about that too. So the latest book we've done is called Rip It Up, and it's a translation of this purportedly untranslatable Japanese novel written in 2000 by Komishita. And this book was a sensation in Japan. It's basically like it was like a watershed moment for writers like Yoko Tawada and all these people. It was like a huge, huge hit. It won the most prestigious literary prize in Japan possible. It got all these rave reviews. It was pretty divisive because it's kind of like an unhinged book, but it was basically like an iconic moment in Japanese literature. And I had emailed my friend Kit. I talk about Kit a lot. He's a real sweet guy. But I had emailed him because I was looking for a Japanese translator for an unrelated project. I was translating a Japanese video game, or I was helping work with it, whatever. And he was like, "This guy knows Japanese." And then, this is a totally different story. But by the time the guy wrote to me, like it had been translated by like thousands of people on Twitter. You can read the Rhizome article about it. But then this guy really shot his shot because he was like, "Hey, I know like we literally had just met like online, and like I know nothing about you or who you are or whatever, but like I have this book that I've been working on for 6 years. Like, would you want to read it?" And I was like, "Yes." And he sent it to me. And from the first sentence, I was like, I must translate this book. Like, how has this book not been translated yet? And this guy, Daniel Joseph, he was like we're both from like kind of like the Massachusetts like hardcore punk kind of milieu when we were like growing up. We were in like all these scenes, going to hardcore shows and stuff. And he was in a hardcore punk band, and then he went to Harvard to study Japanese medieval literature before dropping out. But what he did was, apparently as an exercise, he went to the library at Harvard, and he picked out like a book at random, or like a book that he thought looked cool, and he picked this book out, and he was like, "What the hell is this?" And he's been working on it for 6 years, and multiple people have tried to translate it, but have never like done it. Like they've never been able to get through like the entire thing or get it in like a satisfactory state. And so he literally just worked on it for half a decade and more, right? And he's famous because he translated Terminal Boredom, if you know that book, which recently came out on Verso. He helped translate it, and he helped edit it, which was amazing. And he was like, he was like, I just did that, it's a cool book and everything, but like I've been working on, like, this book is like my life. Like I've been working on it for so long. And I pitched it to my friend at New Directions, and they said it was too weird. And I was like, that, like every single green light possible went on in my head after that. I was like, that is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. If New Directions says this book is too weird, like what the hell? Like, what do you even exist? Like, don't get me wrong, I love New Directions, but it's like, why do you even exist? Like, I thought the whole point was to publish something that's like too weird, right? So
That's
what?
so like encapsulates kind of the whole inpatient situation where
It is a situation. But anyway, so he was like, he was basically like, "Do you want to publish this?" And I was like, "Yes, we must publish this immediately. Like, this is a masterpiece. Like, I can't believe who would think it's too weird. Like, this is insane." And I knew right away how I wanted to design it, because I had just spent a very stoned night going through this Japanese fireworks catalog that was put up on the Public Domain Review. Yeah, you can see them there. And I was like, this is perfect for the book because it's so like hallucinatory and incantatory, like all this like kind of explosive energy. And I was like, it's so perfect for the book. And I showed him it, and he was like, you fucking get it, dude. He was like, I'm so happy that we are doing it together. And the book has been, I mean, it's one of, I think it might be like my favorite thing that I've published. And it's the kickoff to the new translation imprint that we're doing here at Inpatient called Mercurial Editions, where I am specifically looking out for books that are considered either untranslatable or too weird, or just like, you know, books that otherwise wouldn't, because with translation especially, you have to have market fit, right? You have to make sure that there's like an audience or people will buy it. I don't really care about any of that. I want to make sure that the book is, you know, like is good. The book is interesting. The book says something that hasn't been said before. And so I'm specifically looking out for those kind of works to try to bring them into English, because, you know, translation is such a, you know, it's such a, you know, risky endeavor, and it's hard enough as it is to get it all going. And I really want to, you know, kind of put my expertise, aka my money, behind getting this book out and bringing this kind of stuff out into the world, because I feel like it's so necessary. And so much translation is guided by market principles. And I feel like if you want to run a, I feel like literature is anti-market. Like experimental literature, it's really funny because Daniel Joseph, the translator, he's from Massachusetts, but he pronounces literature. So he's like, it's a fantastic work of Japanese literature. Just like, and he's like a huge punk dude with a big beard and like tats everywhere. Like he rules, but he calls it literature. And I don't know if it's a extended joke or if he's actually a genius, but he's definitely a genius. But
Absolutely a genius. Like,
yeah, but so and it's the kind of thing where it's like, you know, I feel like experimental literature is it decidedly anti-market, and it has to be something that there is no audience, right? Because it'll make its own audience. The audience will find yourself, right? I feel like if there's any overriding ethos to what I do besides, you know, like my flippant little motto, it's that I want my books, the books that I publish, I call them my books, but, you know, like the books that I design and publish and put out, I want them to be like the kind of books where you come across them in the store and you're like, you feel like you've stumbled on a secret, or like you feel like you've come across something that no one else has read or knows about, and you're like reading this magic tome and you've encountered like someone who truly speaks to you, right? Like that, like the words are kind of like, you know, falling off the page and tumbling into your heart, and they're like written in burning coal and like glowing, right? Like that's like kind of the vibe that I want to inculcate here at Inpatient.
I
And
feel
that's
like
what I hope.
you've achieved that.
I
Um,
try.
it's, no, it's really, your books are really your books. The books you make are really special. And I think it's because of all of these factors that you've spoken about, kind of the care and the vision that just, you know, most presses don't have because they're concerned about marketability or, you know, what's on trend. And Inpatient is so incredibly not concerned about what's on trend. So, so when you do open up an Inpatient book, it's like, I don't know, it's quite exciting.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I like to publish books that I feel like exist like out of time. Like everyone's trying to publish a book that's like, oh, it's speaking of the times. It's so, you know, like whatever, like it captures this particular moment in history. But I feel like all the great books that so-called capture those moments in history, they're read like, you know, they're only discovered decades after that happens. You know, there's so many examples of that. The obvious one being, you know, like Shakespeare or Moby Dick or whatever, or even like, you know, books from the 60s and 70s, like Constance de Jong, like, you know, Modern Love, right? Like that's like considered like the downtown 70s novel, but like no one read that when that came out. No one cared about that book. It was just out. But, you know, I'm sure like if you look at what was like, you know, NYRB's like top book of the 70s, you won't even recognize it anymore. Like I'm looking for books that exist out of band, outside of time, that create their own universes and pull in, you know, the world around them and create their own little world. That example, you know, that kind, like I'm looking for books that have their own facets through which we reflect, you know, um, life. Like that's kind of what I go for. So like when a book is like clearly trying to like be of the time, like I feel like you're just kind of setting yourself up to fail. Yes, like Tremont as well. Like you're kind of like setting yourself up to fail in a way, because it's like you're writing to a dead end of time. Like you're only, I mean, obviously there's something to be said for writing contemporary and talking about the moment. There's definitely like space and a necessity for it. But I feel like when it comes to literature, you know, there has to be this kind of not so much universal, but there has to be this kind of like, you know, otherworldly aspect to it, where it's like, where did this come from? You know, like Rip It Up was written in 2000, but I feel like it could have been written in 1940. I mean, there's cell phones in it, so I feel like it could be written, you know, like it feels like it could be written now or anytime, and that's really what it's all about. So like I said, I just want to make books that when you find them, you feel like you stumbled on a secret. And I feel like, that's the main motivation there.
I love that so much. Also, just quick note to plug the launch party for this book, Rip It Up, that we were just talking about. It's tomorrow at at Molasses Books in Bushwick.
Yeah, 8 p.m. Come through. It's gonna be really fun. Coco and I. There's a scene in the book where they go to a gallery exhibition, and there's a comically awful poetry reading. Just like think of the worst poetry reading you've ever been to in your life, and it's even worse than that, but it's hilarious. And we're gonna perform this poetry reading at the reading. So I really hope everyone wants to comes through. It's gonna be a really nice evening. So yeah. Would love to see you there.
I'm really excited. The book is hilarious. Like I have to say, it's just
I laugh on every page. When I feel bad, I honestly open up to a random page and I'm like cackling, like a
yeah. I mean, I think that Daniel Joseph, the translator, just did such an incredible job. I can't even imagine. It took him like 5 years to do this, and
yeah, it's insane. And the book was actually held up because he was obsessed with this one like phrasing of a word that's in a like Osakan dialect. And he was like, we can't go to print yet. I don't think it's the right word. And he like reached out to people who lived in a specific neighborhood in Osaka to get the proper translation. Like he's like he's a madman. Like it's beautiful. And that's the number. That's what I wanna be emblematic of. That's the kind of people that I want to have, in the roster, as they say.
Yes. Wow. Is there anything else you want to say before we open up maybe to conversation?
I guess I can kind of talk about the past year or so because I made a video game. I don't know if people know this, but I made a small press simulator called Small Press. Can you see that? Called Small Press Tycoon, and it's in a box. I boxed it and everything. But I made a actual. If you've ever wanted the experience of running a small press, basically during like lockdown, whatever, it was like April of 2021. I was so bored and I was so like, I miss having readings. I miss like doing events, all this kind of stuff. And I was like teaching myself how to use this game engine called Godot. And I was like, I'm just going to do what I know, which is like make books. And I thought it'd be really funny to make like a small press simulator because it's like something that's so like it's not interesting. You're like folding books and stuff. You're like in a you're by yourself most of the time doing layouts and stuff. But I was like, I thought it'd be really funny to make a game called Small Press Tycoon where, you can create a small press empire, make all the books that you ever wished existed. And, you can make them happen. And it was just really funny because I totally just made it. I made it in a very manic period when I was like smoking tons of weed, like not chain smoking it, listening to Donald Fagen's The Night Fly. And I just made this album happen. I mean, I made this, video game kind of happen. And it's got an insane reception here. I can actually show a little bit of it if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me do it. All right, can you hear me? Can you hear the game? Can you see that? Can you see it all right? Basically,
yeah, we can see it.
It's this like little small press game where you start off and you start off as an intern for a small press. And that's me, obviously. And you could start off and then you can like, do all the fun stuff. You can you can set up news boxes. You can, you have like, you start off with $1,000 and you can print like your friend Greg. You can make whatever book you want to make called like, call it Teen High Times. Make a broadside print of it make 100, do all this kind of fun stuff. And you can like make the books happen. You can put them into bookstores, right? You can hold readings. Oh, this reading wasn't very good, but and you can have like all these kind of little events happen. And just so you know, this picture you can see is this is a copy. This is like a background of what the Inpatient HQ looks like. But I really wanted to get the experience of running a small press. So, you start off and it's like you sell like one copy like at a time, but then once you get going, once you really, get into some stores, you print more books, you really make it happen. You know, you can get on top of the world, you can win awards, you can, you know, eventually get involved in like a Borgesian subplot involving a never-ending book that eventually like leads you into like down the travails of like a cult. But it was just super fun to make. And I really, you know, it was really fun to see the response, especially during lockdown and, you know, lockdown or but like during quarantine and all that, because it really put everything I knew about Inpatient and about running a small press like into light and into like crystallize it into this game. And the response has been really great and people have been super into it. And Small Press Gazette has released their bi-weekly industry update. You know, there's like trending, there's lots of references to existing small publishers. Like the best-selling press right now is Secondary Information, which is a loving parody of my press, you know, Primary Information, whatever, you all know. But you know, it was just super funny because I just literally, I'd never made a game before really. I just like put it out there. I put it out on Steam, you know, for release. And then people were really into it. And I thought it was so funny. And I made, you know, I made these boxes and everything. And eventually I got a email from Harper's that was like, hi, we'd love to publish an excerpt of Small Press Tycoon in like our upcoming like October issue. And I was like, seriously? Like that's pretty insane. And they published like this amazing little they published one of the side plots where you get involved with like the Borgesian manuscript that you can smuggle out of the library. And I was just like, this is insane. Like this is just this dinky little game that I made for fun. But I think it really resonated with people because I tried to showcase both like kind of the joy of running a small press, but also kind of like how strangely futile it is because the game doesn't end. It just keeps on going and you can make tons and tons of money and you can win all the awards, but like it just keeps going and it's all in real time. And people have like really commented on how it like stresses them out because it's just like continually happening. You know, and you can also see what it's like if you want to like make a zine. You know, there's like a stapling mini game. Can you see that? You can make, you know, get the staples done. It's just like real life. I'm gonna stop sharing. But yeah, so that's my insane game that I made. But people have been like really, you know, I think people just like it because it's so silly and so goofy and it exemplifies kind of what I'm about at Inpatient here. But I also recently learned that there's this amazing bookstore in Paris called After 8 Books. You know, they're really great. But they had some party, and then afterwards they started playing Small Press Tycoon on their laptop because I sent them a copy. And there's this amazing picture where it's like a bunch of like very hip, cool Parisians, and they're all huddled around a laptop and they're like playing Small Press Tycoon. And they were like, "It's so fun, it's amazing!" And I was like, "That is just so wonderful." I'm so glad it resonated with people. I'm currently working on a sequel called Publishing Magnate, where you get to climb the ladder all the way to the top of the publishing world and you get to control the entire discourse. So we'll see what happens there. Speaking of controlling the discourse, maybe we should drop into the QA now. I just ranted for a long time. You know, I only expected to talk for like 30 minutes. I wasn't really sure what I was going to say, but I'm more than happy to entertain any questions people have or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much.
You can roast me too.
Yeah, everyone can roast Mitch. But thank you so much. I mean, for your time.
You're on mute.
Really? What? Am I on mute?
Oh no, my sound was off. Sorry. Oh look. Sorry.
I love that. No, I was just wanted to say thank you so much for your time, for I feel like I've known you, I've known Inpatient for a long time, and I've never gotten sort of this kind of linear story of how Inpatient came to be, and it's really amazing. I don't know, I feel proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about your book and how Marston Hefner was obsessed with it. Coco's book, Hugh Hefner's like, you know, fail son was really obsessed with Coco and really obsessed with his book.
It was really, really random.
It was insane. But he wrote me this crazy email being like, Coco Fitterman. This guy's like also like, I think he's like 30 years old. He was like, Coco Fitterman is my favorite author. She's a genius. Da, 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 da. I want to make a reading with her. I want to meet her. You should have gotten him to flow you out, man. I know where he lives.
It made me really uncomfortable. Anyway, Yeah, okay. So if anyone has sent questions to Jared, maybe Jared
It
can read them.
looks like Charity, your hand is raised.
Oh
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
didn't see that.
Hi.
Go
Can
ahead.
you can you hear me now? Yes. Hi. So I've been like in and out of this session, and some parts, like wild horses, could not have dragged me away. I was fascinated with your narrative, and I have a million questions about like the financing aspect, but I'm going to save that for another time. I'm a professor of comparative literature, so I have a disciplinary question for you, which is when you first started talking, I had questions already about erotica and pornography and about Eastern Europe, because as some of your authors might have told you, after the collapse of communism, there was a big shift in the publishing industry in Poland, and I would imagine also in Russia and Ukraine. And Polish poetry was a dominant current in the literary world in the 70s, 80s. And then the presses that were publishing them came to crisis, and they couldn't publish as much. And the explanation among scholars was, well, those presses, in order to hang on, had to start publishing pornography. And without sounding like too Jesse Helms or moralistic here, can you just speak to that? Like, does it matter to you that low budget publishing has to parlay with pornography or erotica, or is that just not an interesting question to you? Maybe you can try to just speak back to the Academy a bit on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question, Charity. This is something I really want to talk about, so I'm glad you brought it up. A big influence for me is Olympia Press, which was established in France. They in Paris in the 40s, and they started out and they were famous for publishing. They were the first publishers of Beckett, of Burroughs, of all these very famous, very big authors, and they were subsidized by pornography. They started off by publishing, blue books, like really just raunchy books, but they were books that were written by authors who needed money. Like they published a book by Guillaume Apollinaire, like a erotic book by him that I just recently got at Codex Books, which rules. But like that's the thing, is that erotica has helped subsidize so much of publishing, and there's such a demand for it, and that's what led me to actually kind of publish Whore Foods by L.A. Warman, because it was this unbelievable synthesis of just a debased erotic genre sentiment, but written. It is a piece of literature. It is an amazing work of writing in its own respect, but one that traffics in sheer debauchery and complete debasement and celebration and exploration of the human body. And so part of what I'm kind of getting at for that is the idea that I don't think I get the subsidizing art or literary endeavors via so-called low market or not literary things, but I was like, why not just do both? Why not have there be high literature that is explicitly erotic, that in fact celebrates the genre of erotica and pornography, and that's why I published Big Joe by Samuel R. Delany, which I couldn't believe had never been published before. Samuel, he publishes a lot of stuff, but he has apparently, from what I've talked about, he has a hard time publishing just to straight up quote unquote erotica, right? It's because I feel like people don't take it seriously, or it's seen as like a liability or whatever. I feel like we've moved where small presses used to have that stuff to subsidize it. Now with Amazon and Kindle marketplaces and all that, erotica has sort of moved to that, and it's now just this commodity total other world that is also, if you look at the numbers, is by far the best selling. It blows everything out of the water, but it's completely ignored by quote unquote literary presses. And I was like, why? It's amazing. Whore Foods is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It's a masterpiece, and it's extremely, there's parts of it that are really gross and hot and sexy, and it does the whole spectrum of human sensation. And I don't think that is at odds with literature. In fact, I think that's what creates the kind of literature I want to make. I hope that answers your question.
Wow. Yeah. So let me just sort of take one more question from there. I'm pretty clear now on your position, but can you imagine that anything might not get published, say just in your list, because it doesn't align with, what should I say? Well, let's just try to take it back to the Polish example. I mean, not Czesław Miłosz, but maybe other poets who were working in a different vein couldn't get published because their work wasn't sexy enough, and then it wasn't read. And there weren't alternate, and also there weren't also very commodifiable venues like Amazon and other self-publishing, and there was nothing digital. Do you think that that's happened at all in your practice of running your press? Is there an author who you passed over because it wasn't sexy?
Yes. I mean, I used to run I had an explicitly erotic magazine that we used to do called Inpatient with an M. And that, we received a lot of submissions, and if something wasn't really hot, I wouldn't publish it. I mean, if it was still good, right? Like if it was still like a good literary piece, I would probably still run it. But the thing is, I feel like the hotness is a function of its quality of writing. Like the better that writing is, the more hot it was to me, or the more I found it to be like, this interesting example of erotica. Because I feel like for so many people, erotica is like a mechanical thing where it's like, does it, I'm going to get a little blue here, but like, does it get you off? Does it turn you on? Whatever. For me, I was so interested in like the prose styling of it. How do you get to that point? How do you describe orgasms? How do you describe the human body, or like, the disgusting sensations that we feel with one another, right? Like I was so fascinated by that. So there were some authors, I think, who didn't necessarily like, quote unquote, like make the cut for that necessarily. But I will say that it's never been a problem for me where if something is like too sexy or it's explicitly like, in that vein. Like I love works that kind of function like that. And I'm actually about to publish L.A. Warman's next book called Dust, which kind of operates in a similar vein where it is an erotica work, but it traffics in these kind of different ideas of what sexuality means, what sensuality means. It's a lesbian romance set in like a post-apocalyptic desert, and it gets extremely freaky and kind of like weird and out there. And a lot of it is very much kind of the antithesis of Whore Foods. And the fact that L.A. Warman wrote this amazing book that won the Lambda Literary Prize, that has like, sold a lot of copies, and she so decidedly took like another direction of erotica, is something I want to try to champion and celebrate, because I like the bravery of that, and I like the idea that you challenge yourself with that.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. Thank you for coming. Any other questions?
Yeah, you guys can feel free to just sort of unmute and roast Mitch.
Yeah, come at me.
Could I just ask real quick, what band Daniel Joseph played in Massachusetts?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me see. It might be on the Molasses book event page. I'm trying to remember what it was, because he just mentioned he was in hardcore bands, so I'm looking up right now. The band that Komashita was in, I'm just going to delay some time right now, was called Inu, which is the Japanese word for dog, I-N-U. That was the name of the band, which I guess is like a well-known like punk band. I hadn't really heard of them.
Stooges. Yeah.
What? You
Very
know
Stooges.
Yeah.
I was thinking Iggy Pop, but sorry. Yeah.
I feel like Daniel, you should come tomorrow and just ask him. I'm sure he'd be willing to. But
I wish I could. Yeah.
He's a bit he's a little older than me. I think I don't actually know his exact age. You should never reveal a translator's age. But I don't know. But he's like, there might be some tapes or something floating around. He was in a few, but in his bio he talks about how basically he spent a lot of his 20s screaming in basements. So I'm sure we could dig it up.
Okay.
So I can get back to you. Because that's such a good question. I never even thought to ask, but I'm gonna interrogate him. I'm actually gonna text him right now.
Thanks.
Of course.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
First, thank you to Coco and Jared and Fred, and especially to Mitch for doing this. This is like way above my cool pay grade. Like I'm basically just a 19th century French nerd, but I work on right. It's got its moments, but I work a little bit on like, I was really struck when you were talking about how much of the community of publishers and readers that I work on in the 19th century went through like the exact same things that you're talking about, like the same kind of like rogue putting of books like in the night, the same kind of like going up against institutions. So I'm just interested in that, you know, there's this like inheritance that you have of this, you know, these actions that get repeated time after time. And but my real question is, to what degree do you think about your readership as like a particular kind of community, as even like an intimate public or any kind of public of sorts of readers? Is that something that you have in mind when you're thinking about what books to publish, or is it really just your taste, or do you see your taste as being in line with a particular group of people's tastes?
That's an excellent question. I'm really glad you asked that because you know, when working these book fairs, you know, sometimes behind a table, sometimes in a trench coat, you know, I have yet to find like a singular like persona that is the impatient the impatient reader. My friend Ed Halter, who helped me get the news box, he was once like, he was like, you run a press, but it's really more like a bookstore. Like most presses have some sort of like, you know, theme or idea or overriding principle, but you just publish what you want to read. Like, you know, there's such an eclecticism and collection of stuff to it. And I was like, you're right. And like, I've always wanted to run a bookstore. It's like my dream to be a bookstore, you know, owner and run a bookstore. And I will say one of my favorite things about Impatient and what I've discovered is that there is no impatient reader. Like it's so many different people, and not everyone will like every book that we do, which I think is totally fine. You know, not everything has to appeal to every single reader, and I'm willing to take that risk and put out stuff that maybe no one will like. You know what I mean? Like some of my favorite stuff, you know, is like kind of relatively, you know, obscure, I guess, or like, you know, I have kind of weird tastes. But I love the fact that, you know, there will be someone who will love one book that might hate another book, or someone, but they'll still like, I feel like, come back and appreciate what I'm doing, or be with you know, with us, or be down. But I've seen like, I can be honest in that I've seen, you know, I've been to like festivals in Hong Kong, and I had even there I had such a crazy array of readers, everything from like, I remember there was this very she couldn't have been like older than like her mid-20s, but she was like very petite, very like demure, like in a schoolgirl outfit, and she came right up to the table and she was like, I want whore foods. I was like, excellent, you know what I mean? And then I've also, you know, had a whole range of people, straight, gay, bi, black, white, whatever, you know, like it really, there's been a huge plethora of people. I think that's the most beautiful thing. Like I feel like it's very hard for me to pin down what my readership is, and it's something that honestly I try not to think about, because I think that kind of breeds this sort of myopic view. And obviously you should always, I feel like as a writer, maybe you should be cognizant of your audience, of like, who am I writing for, or who do you think you're writing for, which is a hard question. But for me, I really just publish stuff that I think it comes down to my own personal taste, and something that I personally find, you know, fascinating or interesting or intriguing or striking or anything. It's really hard for me because I feel like, you know, you're supposed to have like editorial principles, but I really don't. Like I have no editorial principles. It's just like, if something like hits me, then I'll publish it. I don't care if it's a poem. I don't care if it's a 400-page biography or autobiography of a made up historical. I don't care what it is. If it like hits me, it hits me, really. So you kind of have to like take your best shot. You know, I'm sorry to all the aspiring authors out there, but I think that translates into there being this amazing like coterie of impatient readers. And when I meet, and you know, I've gotten amazing emails from people. Like I remember we published L.A. Warman's first we did a chapbook first called How to Become a Lesbian. And this was like 2016 too. So still like, you know, the early years, you know. And I just remember we got an email from a like student in the Midwest who was like, I read this chapbook and it gave me the courage to like go out and like ask my crush on a date, and now we're together and like we're doing it. And I was like, that like made my heart explode. You know what I mean? Like I'm not you know, I'm not like a lesbian, I'm not a butch lesbian, I'm not even a lesbian, you know, at all. But like, you know, the fact that like this sort of thing resonates, and I think that speaks to, and a lot of people have spilled a lot of ink over this, but I think it does speak to this kind of universal experience of literature and being able to understand and work through text and writing and have these kind of emphatic, you know, transcendental experiences through text and through literature, that, you know, I'm just some some dude in Brooklyn making this book, and it can just like, you know, have that effect on a wide variety of people. And that's kind of what I've tried to resonate with. So I think, but in my head, like in my head, when I picture like an impatient reader, I've just pictured like some insane freak, like in a trench coat, like in a bookstore somewhere, just like cackling to themselves, like as they read the book. Like that's kind of like in my head, you know, they don't really have like, I can't tell you like their physical characteristics, but I can just tell you that they're like wearing a trench coat. Maybe their pants are a little too short. Their like ankles are showing, and they have like a very like flagrant hat on. But that's generally the ideal impatient reader, I think. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
So like you, basically.
I don't wear a trench coat out, except when I'm going to the Print and Matter book fair. And if anyone's from Print and Matter who's here, don't tell anyone.
No, we love printed matter.
I love Print and Matter too. I'm a huge fan. They're in my game, you know. I love them.
For sure. Anyone else have questions or comments?
Yeah. Hi, Mitch. Thank you so much. It was amazing. It was very interesting, everything. I just want to know if you have like an idea of something that's can be unreachable, an idea of an impossibility in writing that you are like not fully grasping in some sense. Something that for me could be more related to horror in a sense, like because we were talking about erotics and eroticism and pornography. So what are your thoughts on horror as a genre that's dealing with the impossibility of writing?
I love that. No, I would absolutely love to publish more like kind of formalist experimental texts that like kind of approach that idea of like, whether that's through form, whether it's poetic or a novel, whatever, something that's kind of like gases like The Tunnel or something like that, that kind of works in this horror vein, but is using like the form of the book to kind of explore this. Not like, I mean, House of Leaves is pretty good too, I guess, but like, you know, something a little less gimmicky. But I would absolutely love to publish like a really like crazy horror novel. Like I love genre. Like I'm a huge fan. Me and Kit have this joke where we call it like debased genre, because it's something that's so not trafficked in literary circles now. There's like, you know, places like New Direction, Verso, Doc, you know, Archive, whatever, they FSG, they publish literature, capital L, literature, literary fiction. But I love genre writing. I love writing that operates on tropes and supplants and flips them and works with all of that so much. And I would absolutely love to write like a really like kind of crazy existential, or I mean, I would love to write it too. I'm a failed writer, but I'm working on that. But I would love to also read, you know, this amazing, you know, horror. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Something that really attacks the idea of universal knowability or of like mankind's, you know, place in themselves, like in their mind, like kind of attacks this idea of the text. But I would love to do it in like a formalist style. Like I would love a crazy book that like, you know, starts off as like a regular horror novel, but then becomes like a concrete poem of madness or something like that. Like I think that would be so cool. Or like the text starts like literally like disassembling itself on the page and like dripping off and stuff like that. Like I really love that kind of stuff. I'll be honest, I haven't really encountered anything like that. I think because probably it's really hard to do. You know what I mean? Like I think good genre writing is really, really hard. Like I'm trying to publish some more fantasy. It's just really hard to come by like stuff that's really good. That's not like kind of like, you know, hokey. But yeah, no, I would absolutely, I'm very into genre publishing, and I would love to do something like that. So hopefully it can happen. Hopefully, if you know anyone, let me know. Or if you're doing it, let me know. But I just love the idea of like there being like this kind of like textual void that is like breached. Like that's kind of really what I'm going for. That's another motto, I guess, for Impatient, is breaching the textual void. You know, Impatient Press. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can call it a night. I've ranted long enough already.
Yeah. Speak now or forever hold your peace. But yeah, if there are no more questions, I guess it's time to wrap up. I don't want to, because it's been such an illuminating and wonderful talk. Mitch, thank you so much again.
Of course.
we're really lucky to have you as our first speaker, especially inaugurating this series. And
I'm very excited to see what comes next. This is, again, super grateful. Usually I have to like trap people at like parties or again on street corners to talk about this kind of stuff. So I'm very happy that, CUNY had me, and I'm super stoked everyone's into it, and your all questions were all amazing. And yeah, hope to maybe see you at a reading or event soon. And yeah, maybe even, send me your book. Who knows what'll happen.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, you guys should keep it in mind. Anyone who's writing a horror novel. But yeah, you can, keep up with Inpatient Press on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, actually, we have our next event in this series, March 17th, and it's going to be hosted by the lovely Fred, who just asked the horror question. And it's going to be a conversation with Vicky Now and Mike Corral, two writers who I think it'll be really.
Vicky's amazing.
Yeah. So actually, Jared, who's also in the Reverie series organizer person, runs Black Sun Lit, which is an amazing press as well. Who's publishing her book that's coming out soon, right, Jared? Fish Carcass. Yeah.
Incredible title.
Anyway, that's going to be awesome. So yeah, mark it in your calendars, March 17th, same time, same place.
Shout out Black Sun Lit. You published Apostasy, which is an amazing, amazing book. Thank you.
Thank you. We should keep in touch, Mitch.
Oh, we shall. We'll do the thing.
I love it. Yeah, also, I just wanted to mention there are a ton of events that are open to the public that are in the comparative literature department that, maybe like we aren't really involved with, but I just want to plug them. You can follow, I guess you can like find them on the GC's comparative literature website, which just got revamped. And the next one that's coming up is on March 4th. Yeah, thank you, Jared. Jared has been so great with dropping all the links of things that I mentioned. So thank you so much. And yeah, the next event is on March 4th. It's called Archival Writing and the Intimate on Writing Tehran Children. And it's a lecture by Mikhail Dekel. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out all of the Complit events. And yeah, if there's nothing else, just thank you again, everyone, for coming and for, listening. And I love Inpatient Press so much. And I'll see some of you tomorrow. If anyone is coming to Molasses tomorrow, it'll be a real treat, honestly, to hear this read aloud. It's really fun.
It's gonna be really crazy. It's gonna be super fun.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. I love you all.
Good night, everyone. Bye.